People generally think that making a game in C++ is very hard and useless, but is that really true? Some years ago, I was at one of my first game jams, and I was just getting into C++ game development. And I actually made a simple C++ game there with SFML. And I really wanted to move on and learn OpenGL. But while talking to someone there, he told me that it is useless to learn OpenGL, because all the game companies use Unity or Unreal. So what's the point? And that was really upsetting for me. OpenGL was already very hard to learn, and moreover, I just found using game engines or doing web dev extremely boring. I however managed to learn OpenGL eventually, and after 2 years, I made this Minecraft clone, all made from scratch, and I went to a high school contest with it, and I did pretty well there. But one of the judges didn't like it, and he wasn't a teacher, he was just some years older than me. So I talked to him about this, and the reason he didn't like the project was because I didn't use an engine. And in his words, I was limiting my learning potential. And that was the general vibe I received from people. Not to mention I didn't know if I would ever get a job doing C++ for game dev. So I felt very demotivated. Fast forward some years, however, I went to a game developers meet, late at night in a pub, hoping I could promote my Steam game there. And after speaking with a guy for a little, we went to see my game. So I opened Visual Studio, and I could see concern coming from his eyes. He said, "Wait, why are you opening Visual Studio?" Almost like being frightened, because he didn't expect the game to have been made in C++. Fortunately, he liked it very much. And now, I managed to learn how to do from scratch a lot of difficult things, like 3D renderers and multiplayer. And I'm even learning physics simulations right now. A sneak peek for the next video. And people don't look at me weird anymore, now that I actually can do cool stuff with C++. But what made me stick to doing games from scratch instead of using an engine? Is it really hard to make games in C++? And is it useless? Let's talk about it. So let's get the usefulness out of the way first. So C++ is not a dead language, unlike what people think. Almost all game engines are made in C++, and it isn't the only place where C++ is used. And no, it won't be completely replaced by Rust in the next 100 years. Computer languages get replaced very slowly. Bank systems still use COBOL, and that's like a 65-year-old language. You can't expect Microsoft to rewrite their entire operating system in Rust. It would be way too expensive. And look, here is the thing. I know you can totally make a game with Unity and C#, and I have nothing against that. But if we all learn C# or Blueprints, who will make your game engine? Like, Unreal isn't just supposed to write itself. And I know people like to make fun of those who make a game engine, because you can't ever compete with Unreal. But who do you think Unreal will hire next? Probably not someone that only knows Blueprints, I can tell you that. Things are not only about making a game. 99% or even 100% of your projects haven't ever been released on Steam, and they never will. Trust me, it took me 2 weeks to prototype this little game, and then 3 years more to publish it on Steam. It takes a lot of work, so realistically, all you gain from your project was some knowledge. And I simply think you learn way more by doing something from scratch. And I'm not even talking about specific C++ skills, I'm talking about programming skills in general. Like, let's be real, you probably spend more time in the Unity editor than coding for many projects. Meanwhile, coding a 5,000 line project will give you skills that no book or training will get you. So even if you work with an engine at a company, you will learn to use it quickly, but your low-level skills can't easily be learned by your colleagues that have never done these things. So let's take a real case. You go to work at EA, they have their own engine made in C++, and you can't use it before joining them. And they also have a special team for the engine, and they are to this day making improvements and adding new features to it for every new game they release. And I don't know about you, but I don't really want to be a gameplay programmer, but rather do more complex things. So if you are in the same situation, you probably want to take my advice. And I didn't tell you yet, but the real reason I stick with C++ is the fact that I was doing something I really liked. And that matters way more, because you can find a job in any domain if you are good. So if you also like C++, subscribe to this channel, because that's what I do here. But let's talk now about the difficulty aspect. So people think that Unity is simply easier, because you can just drag and drop something on the screen, and that's it. And that's true, but it isn't at all the full picture. Some things are easy, while others are harder. Many game companies have their own game engine for this reason. Let's say you want to make Terraria. You need at some point to optimize the game, so that you don't have a separate entity for each block. Well, that's fun to do. Not to mention that the physics system in Unity feels very floaty and weird, so you'll also need to spend a ton of time tuning it or making one from scratch. And Terraria was made without an engine for this reason. They used a framework called XNA, so it's not very hard to make a Terraria clone in C++. I actually would recommend it to beginners. You can just use a library that can draw sprites on the screen, and you are in business. You just need to start by drawing some blocks on the screen, then add a camera, and then add more difficult things, like collisions. If you don't know how to link libraries in C++ or what to use, I have some setups that you can use, or a full game guide, if you want to see all the things step by step. Let me show you that it isn't that hard. In this full game guide, I use my 2D library, and with it, you can just create a texture object and load it. But probably, all 2D libraries are like that. Then, this function is the update function for the game. It is the same thing as update from Unity, but instead of having multiple scripts, all with an update function, we have only one, and it isn't something bad at all. It is easier for systems to communicate, it is easier for you to control the flow of your game, and you can always add some extra abstractions on top for some smaller gameplay stuff. Here, I just check if some buttons were pressed, and if so, I move my spaceship. Then, I have a follow method on the camera, but it really isn't that difficult. It is very similar to how you would do it in Unity. In order to store all my bullets and enemies, I just store them in vectors. And in order to check if a bullet hit another ship, I just need to check if the distance from the bullet to that ship is smaller than a radius. This isn't that hard, is it? And to render the bullets and the ship, I have some render methods. Of course, I skipped many details that are explained in the full video, but you get the idea. So go in the description now to watch one of these videos, depending on what your experience level is with coding, and start making your own game. See you!